Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our conversations with Homer's Iliad. And now we turn to book 9, what Fagels will call the embassy to Achilles. Really maybe one of the most important books of the Iliad. Some scholars have argued that this is the heart of the Iliad. I think in some ways that it probably is. And I know that for several of my lectures I've been saying, afterwards, hey, book 9 is coming. It's such an influential book for us. Let's go ahead now, and if you haven't been following my earlier lectures at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, find the AP folder. You might want to at least focus on at least 3 of the prior lectures of the 8 that I've already given. Remember, though, let's do a quick summary. At book 1, we've got the invocation of the Muse, and of course the falling out with Agamemnon and Achilles. We'll obviously come back to it here. Because at the conclusion of that falling out, it will be Achilles that asks his mom Thetis to talk to Zeus to say, let the Greeks get jacked seriously, and that's exactly what will have transpired. Book 2, as part of that game, Zeus will send Agamemnon his bad dream. We'll have the catalog of the ships, the catalog of the chariots, as it's referred to, as a demonstration of all of the different people who are involved in this contest. In book 3, we've got Paris versus Menelaus, and we think that the war is over because Menelaus has defeated Paris. In book 4, of course, Zeus has this conversation with Hera, and she says no. Zeus says fine. Pandarus will shoot at Menelaus, and the war is back on. In book 5, we have Diomedes and his Aristeia. Now, we're going to see Diomedes at the end of this book, so we want to remind ourselves what an amazing, ferocious warrior fighter he is. He pretty much takes the place of Achilles and injures, in fact, both Aphrodite as well as Ares in book 5. In book 6, that's a pivotal book for us. Hector will return back to the walls of Troy. He'll have his last conversations with his wife, and as well, he will see his son for the last time, right? He's with Andromache, and then he will say goodbye. You'll have that really powerful pathos scene that shows the warrior Hector with his family. Then in book 7, we've got Ajax versus Hector. There comes a truce because the two warriors cannot kill each other. And then in book 8, we've got Zeus and his scales, and he decides that the Trojans, led by Hector, will in fact begin to win. It's all of that that will then lead to this pivotal book 9, where because of the fact that so many Greeks have died, and because the fact that the Greeks are backed up to their ships, now all of a sudden the question is, well, it's probably time to ask Achilles for help. Now again, if you haven't been following each of our lectures and you just want to dip into the 3 books that matter up to this point, obviously they're 1, 3, and 6. After book 9, everything, as I'm going to say at the conclusion of this lecture, everything kind of comes to its penultimate end. By book 16, remember in book 9 here, we'll finish 9 and we'll begin with 10. But by book 16, Patroclus is dead. By book 22, we have the death of Hector. And by book 24, at the very end, we have Priam with Achilles in Achilles' tent. That's significant because in this book we're going to spend quite a bit of time in Achilles' tent. Now again, the hope is that you're doing your own annotative and your own reading work. I would really hope that if you haven't been reading these books prior to my comments, do it now. Stop even the lecture and go and read and annotate on your own. See how much of this you can respect and appreciate on your own before you come back to my work. Reminding you, of course, about learning theory, that ability to connect new information to old information in meaningful ways. And then importantly, our reading annotative approach that asks 3 guiding questions at level 1, what does the text say? At level 2, what does the text mean? At 2A, themes, messages, and at 2B, we are concentrating on symbolism and irony. There's a lot of other ways that we could look at this text in terms of 2B. And again, we'll comment periodically about what makes this an epic similes and the like. But for our purposes here, primarily symbolism and irony. And then finally at level 3, which is most important for us, right? How can I relate to this information? We're going to ask about everything that's kind of come to this point, books 1 through 8. And the ways in which book 9 kind of assumes all of that. And we'll ask, of course, about other texts as well at 3A. And then finally, and I think always most importantly, significantly, you have to own this text. It's got to mean something to you. Don't just take my word for it that this is an amazing book, for example, out of an amazing poem. Let this poetry move you if it can. My job is to try and obviously make that possible for you. So, at this point, I would hope, that you are learning how to read an epic poem. And it's so important for our AP work for the rest of the year that we kind of learn how this reading works for us. So I'm hoping now that we will go. Now, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the important stuff that goes on in this. Let's go ahead and do this really quickly. This is a book of speeches. I will read more from this book than I will have read from any of the prior 8 books preceding. And a part of that is there's some compelling speeches which have to be addressed, I believe, in their entirety. I don't think this poem can really be understood through just summary, what Francis Bacon says in Of Studies, reading by deputy. But I certainly don't think that this book can be read by deputy or summary only. I think you've got to hear it. I think you've got to hear the arguments. It's an amazing rhetorical book in terms of the way in which speeches work. Let's get through it really quickly. 1, the Greeks are in a panic at the beginning of the book. In fact, so much so that Agamemnon says, let's quit and go home. And you wonder if, in fact, this is testing, or if, in fact, Agamemnon has figured it out. It's probably one of those things that they're going to lose the next day, simply because of Hector and what he's been able to do. Diomedes will say no. Nestor will step up and say 2 things. Let's eat, let's feed and drink them in. And then he will say in private with a group of the generals to Agamemnon, it's time that you apologize to Achilles. Agamemnon's immediately going to say, you're right. He makes this unbelievable list of Scooby snacks. We'll get to it. It's huge. It's basically he offers them the whole world. And then Nestor will suggest that Oedipus, Phoenix, and Ajax will represent and go as an embassy to Achilles to say to Achilles, please return. They will go, they will find Achilles, we'll take a look at that whole exchange, and I'm going to sum it all up by saying Achilles says no. He says, in fact, not only will I not return to help the Greeks fight this thing out, I'm thinking I probably am going to go ahead and bugger off and go home. Odysseus has to go back. He tells Agamemnon that it's over. And we finish the book with Diomedes basically saying, we don't need Achilles anyway. Forget about him. Let's just go ahead and fight without him. And Diomedes will say to Agamemnon, why don't you fight in Achilles' place on the front lines? Well, we'll go ahead now and work through these opening lines and the major speeches. And as I said, this really is a book of speeches. Here's my question. Jot it in your notes. I'm going to ask you by the end of this book. Has your view of Achilles changed at all as being kind of that powder who sits in his tent? Or have you learned anything about Achilles that is profound? All right, as we like to do, let's go to the opening lines now. And we're told, and we're going to meet a major epic simile. You'll notice that often at the beginning of these books, there's a major epic simile that we will meet, right? So, we're told, the Trojans held their watch that night, but not the Achaeans. God sent panic seize them, comrade of blood-curdling rout. All the best were struck by grief too much to bear, as, here comes our epic simile, as crosswinds chomp the sea where the fish swarm, the north wind and the west wind blasting out of Thrace, in sudden lightning attack, wave on blacker wave cresting, heaving a tangled mass of seaweed out along the surf, so the Achaeans' hearts were torn inside their chests. The epic simile will begin with as or like, and then they'll go several lines, and then we'll have this word so. In other words, panic. The Greeks are ready to be done, right? Distraught with a rising anguish, Atreus' son, Agamemnon, went ranging back and forth, commanding heralds to sound out loud and clear and call them into muster, each by name, but no loud outcry now. The king himself pitched in with the lead heralds summoning troops. They crouped on the meeting grounds, morale broken. Lord Marshal Agamemnon rose up in their midst, streaming tears like a dark spring running down there, some desolate rock face, its shaded currents flowing. Again, another simile, right? So with a deep groan, the king addressed his armies. Now here we go. So we're going to begin this book of speeches with Agamemnon speaking to his own troops. Friends, he says, Lord of the Argives, all my captains, Cronus' son. I love how Agamemnon always goes back to blame it on somebody else other than himself. Cronus' son, Zeus, has entangled me in madness. Now, this will be the first time in this book, and the last time in this book, that Agamemnon will blame whatever it is he's done on madness. Blinding ruin. Zeus is a harsh, cruel god. He vowed to me long ago, he bowed his head, back to book 1, in the way that Zeus, if he bows his head, things have to happen, that I should never embark for home till I had brought the walls of Iliad crashing down. But now I see he only plotted brutal treachery. Now he commands me back to Argos in disgrace, whole regiments of my men destroyed in battle. So it must please his overweening heart. Who knows Father Zeus has lopped the crowns of 1,000 cities, true, and Zeus will lop still more. His power is too great. So come, follow my orders, obey me, all you Argives. Cut and run, sail home to the fatherland we love. We'll never take the broad streets of Troy. And so immediately, that's the opening lines, and Diomedes is then ready to challenge. Beginning at line 45 or so, Diomedes will say, "Desert?" he says, for well, he calls him desperate man to begin with. "So certain are you, the sons of Achaea are cowards, poor soldiers, just because you say so? Desert? If your spirit drives you to sail home, then sail away, my king. The sea lanes are clear, there are your ships of war crowded down the surf, those that followed you from Mycenae, your own proud armada, but the rest of the long-haired Achaeans will hold out right here until we've plundered Troy." And you begin to get the sense, as this poem goes on, that for the Greeks, this ain't got jack all to do with Helen and the fact that Menelaus lost his girl to Paris. It has to do with the fact that there is a tremendous amount of wealth, and dare we say it, other things as well, like women, behind those walls of Troy, and guys like Diomedes are going to stay until they get their share. And if they go running home to the land they love, then the two of us, I and Stylinthus, his best friend, here will fight our way to the fixed doom of Troy. Never forget, we all sailed here with God. And the Achaeans were told, immediately rejoice. It's then Nestor who will make two suggestions to Agamemnon. The old man Nestor. The first one he says is, let's eat. Let's calm the men down. Let's eat. Also, let's go ahead and let's get them some wine to drink. Then, in a private council, Nestor will say to Agamemnon, it's probably time that you accept that you screwed up with Achilles. And it's time to admit that probably we need Achilles if we're going to win this thing, and therefore you got to apologize to Achilles. Now what begins next, at roughly line 135 or so, is Agamemnon's decision. It's a two-part decision for your notes, so I would write it down as such. Okay. The first is that he is going to say, Agamemnon, I was wrong, but it wasn't my fault. Okay. Then the second thing he's going to say is, here's what I will offer to Achilles, and it's basically the world. We are going to read everything that Agamemnon is going to offer, just so you can get an amazing sense of what it is that Agamemnon is giving. But something at the end tells us a little bit of maybe why Achilles is going to say no. Let's begin. 135 and following. And Agamemnon, the lord of men, consented quickly. That's no lie, old man, Nestor. A full account you give of my acts of madness. And this is interesting that he will blame whatever he's done on madness. Think about what Hamlet does, for example, at the end of the play Hamlet with Laertes. Of course, Hamlet's crazy madness has led to the death of course, Polonius, as well as, we could say, Ophelia's suicide. And when he addresses brother Laertes, he says, I'm sorry, I was mad. Remember, he gives that image of, it's like I was crazy and I shot an arrow over the house and shot somebody on the other side of the house. It's not my fault, it's madness. That's exactly what Agamemnon will say. Mad, blind I was. Not even I could deny it. Why? Look, that man is worth an entire army, Achilles. And it may be that we're talking already satirically. The fighter Zeus holds dear with all his heart. How he exalts him now and mauls Achaea's forces. But since I was blinded, lost in my own inhuman rage, now at last I am bent on setting things to rights. I'll give a priceless ransom paid for friendship. Here, before you all, I'll name in full the splendid gifts I offer. And now we're going to get a list of Scooby snacks that will remind us of the kind of gifts promised by Hera and then to some degree Athena in the judgment of Paris. You can have everything. Some of these will kind of be surprising, like why are these gifts? And some of these will just be outlandishly, unbelievably obscene, especially in the bartering about women. Watch this. 7 tripods never touched by fire, 10 bars of gold, 20 burnished cauldrons, a dozen massive stallions, racers who earned me trophies with their speed. He is no poor man who owns what they have won, not strapped for goods with all that lovely gold. What trophies those high-strung horses carried off for me. 7 women I'll give him, flawless, skilled in crafts, women of Lesbos, the ones I chose, my privilege, the day he, I think we're meaning here Achilles, right, captured the Lesbos citadel himself. They outclass the tribes of women in their beauty. These I will give, And along with them will go the one I took away at first, Briseis' daughter. So Briseis is going to come back to Achilles. And I will swear a solemn binding oath in the bargain. I never mounted her bed, never once made love with her, the natural thing for mankind, men and women joined. Now all these gifts will be handed him at once. But it's like, wait, there's more. It's like selling Genji knives or something. Here, wait, there's more. But if later the gods allow us to plunder the great city of Priam, let him enter in when we share the spoils, load the hulls of his ships with gold and bronze as much as his heart desires, and choose for his pleasure 20 Trojan women, second only to Argive Helen in their glory. And then, if we can journey home to Achaean Argos, pride of the breasting earth, he'll be my son by marriage. So as if, the 7 women to start with and then 20 more Trojan women to follow up with, as if that's not enough. Oh yeah, I'll also give one of my daughters, right, in marriage. I'll even honor him on a par with my Orestes, by the way, and a mention of Orestes, which is going to be ironic, given, of course, the plays that we know that are coming in returns to the homecoming of Agamemnon. You can watch that stuff on my Harvard Classics and also the Hamilton mythology lectures. Full grown by now, he says about Orestes. Reared in the lap of luxury? Well, not quite. We'll find out later, that one. 3 daughters are mine in my well-built halls, and then he mentions all 3 of them. Notice that Electra is not mentioned as one of those. And he may lead away whichever one he likes. With no bride price ask, home to Peleus' house. And I will add a dowry, yes, a magnificent treasure, the likes of which no man has ever offered, with his daughter. 7 citadels, 7 cities I'll give him, filled with people. All face the sea, we're told. Right? All this, excuse me, I will extend to him if he will end his anger. The first word of the poem, of course. Right? Rage, anger. Let him submit to me. Now this is the key at the very end of the speech. And many have wondered, why is it that Achilles is so quick to say, I got no interest in your offer? And it may be here. Let him, Achilles, submit to me. Only the god of death is so relentless. Death submits to no one. So mortals hate him most of all the gods. Let him bow down to me. I am the greater king. I am the elder born. I claim the greater man. Excuse me. Now, it's at that point that we want to point out that this may be at the heart of why it is the case. Well, I'll let you jot it down. You think about it. Why do you think this may be at the heart of why Achilles isn't going to accept this gift, right? I mean, think about it. Think about it this way. If I offer you gifts, and it's stuff you don't have, then in some subtle way, I'm proving to you who has more power, right? Because I have stuff you can't yet get without my help. Think of it. What Agamemnon is doing is saying, look, I can give away all of this. I really don't care. I just need him back. He's a pain in my rear, and I don't like him at all, but I'll give it back. But here it is. He has to submit to me because I am the greater man. In other words, it is Agamemnon's pride which will not allow him to say, Achilles is the better man than me, and we cannot win Troy without him, and therefore I'm going to go and personally apologize. That's not at all what's going on here, okay? It will be Nestor who then will say, hey, you know what? I think you should send 3 guys as an embassy to go and do this. The assumption is clearly that Agamemnon himself isn't going to go and grovel in front of Achilles. The first one he suggests is Odysseus, skilled with words, obviously. The second one is Ajax, the great warrior. Why Diomedes is not mentioned, we'll probably infer at the very end. You can kind of tell that Diomedes would not be in favor of a request like this of Achilles anyway. And then finally, old Phoenix, who is, Phoenix is the kind of stepfather of Achilles. We haven't really heard anything about him yet, but he's going to factor in this book. So off they will go, and they are going to find Achilles. Now this will be fascinating, and we're going to pay close attention here. This will be how they find Achilles, sitting next to the Myrmidon shelters in their ships at line 223. And they find Achilles there, delighting his heart now, plucking strong and clear on the fine lyre, beautifully carved, its silver bridge set firm. He won from the spoils when he raised Eton city. Achilles was lifting his spirits with it now, singing the famous deeds of fighting heroes. Across from him, Patroclus sat alone in silence, waiting for Achaeus' son, to finish with his song. So this is compelling. I mean, while all of this blood and slaughter has been going on, when the entourage comes to ask Achilles, please come and help us, we're all getting seriously jacked. Here we have Achilles resting, playing his lyre, singing a song. Notice the lyre came from a conquest of Achilles, and now he's singing a song about heroes, the deeds of fighting heroes. We can't help but think of, for example, a poem like the Iliad itself. In other words, we've seen this kind of sophisticated Achilles. Now, he has, of course, been pouting and upset, but here we'll meet an Achilles that is sophisticated. He's also a host. He's going to take care of them. To just continue at lines 230 and following. And on the embassy came, with good Odysseus in the lead, and the envoys stood before him. Achilles startled. By the way, just to remind ourselves, going back into book 1, the last time we heard about Achilles, back in book 1 of the Iliad, it was book 1, lines 583 and following, 581, 582, and 583. Achilles raged on, grimly camped by his fast fleet, the royal son of Peleus, the swift runner Achilles. Now he no longer haunted the meeting grounds where men win glory. Now he no longer went to war, but day after day ground his heart out, waiting there, yearning, always yearning for battle cries and combat. The last time we heard from Achilles were actually a number of lines before it, lines 483, 484, 485, and following, when he's speaking to his mama Thetis, and he says about her talking with Zeus, remind Zeus of all that you've done. Go, sit beside him, grasp his knees, persuade him somehow to help the Trojan cause, to pin the Achaeans back against their ships, trap them round the bay, and mow them down. That's exactly what Hector has been doing, huh? So all can reap the benefits of their king, so even mighty Atrides can see how